Hey guys, how are you? I want to talk about a power you can develop. In a lot of kind of Vedic cultures, they call them kind of cities, and cities are just sort of attainments, things that you can get, powers, magic powers, if you want. And this is a magic power, but it really is. It's when you break it down into kind of developmental work, it is really just a perceptual shift. Um, but it does feel like a magic power. And what this is it's the power to change people. Now, I think one of the big lessons of interpersonal relationships and one of the big kind of rules of interpersonal relationships is that you shouldn't try to change other people, that you or even worse because you can't change other people. But with every person that we meet, they're not acting independently. You know what I mean? Everyone that we encounter has a unique relationship with us that they don't replicate with anybody else. So, and this is always kind of this can be quite hurtful sometimes, especially when you meet someone you've been in a relationship with someone, for example, or you've had someone as a parent or whatever, and they've been horrible to you. They've been cruel and unkind. And then you see that they were loved by others and they had a completely different relationship. I know myself growing up, I always had this huge jealousy of the way my dad taught adults, like he did night classes and stuff like that. And he would really go out of the way for his students, something that he didn't do for me, or something that I didn't perceive that he did for me. And I remember, I was feeling quite resentful of that, that he was there and they all loved him. And I remember, particularly at his funeral, feeling a kind of a sense of conflict inside of me because all of these people were coming up to me to tell me how much my dad had changed their lives because of his big heart. And I was there kind of fuming, going, Jesus, I didn't get to see that big heart. So this is the interesting thing, right? This is what I want to talk about is that my father had a very individual relationship with me, which he didn't necessarily replicate with everybody else. So I was involved in a dance, if you could call it like that, a relational dance with my father, and he was involved in other dances with different people. And we can notice this I mean, you can notice it now. You can notice it with your partner. Maybe you notice it with a sibling, maybe with an old friend. You fall into a groove, a dance, a pattern, and this pattern sticks. And what happens is it doesn't create space for change, which is what we are all doing all the time. So, what you need to realize is that it's not about waiting for the person's actions to shift to recognize change. It's about you understanding that you are holding up a part of this energetic structure, and that if you drop your part, that person naturally will change. Right. So I think just like a really simple example, for example, is say you're in a relationship with someone and they're always late. Say you have a friend who's always late. So what you do, it happens a couple of times and you're unhappy about it. And then it begins to create a tension inside of you. Now, this tension is a vibrational disturbance. The feeling of love, the feeling of openness has now been reduced. It's been contracted, right? Because all we are is energy. Think of yourself and others in just energetic terms. So the energy has been restricted, contracted. And what you experience then is a kind of a tension and anxiety, a sort of a worry about, oh God, are they going to be late again? And as you worry about them arriving late, because you're existing together, you're existing in tandem, right? As you're worrying about them being late, you are creating the circumstances where they do arrive late. I know that can feel a little conceptual, but that has been my experience, and that's sort of the experience of this teaching, is that you are you have established a belief about this person, okay? And that belief is then reflected in the universe. That person is the universe, and they arrive late. A really simple rule of thumb for just navigating your life is to do, speak, act, think, and feel like everything you do, speak, act, think, and feel is being reflected right back to you by the universe. So when you think this person is awful, they will reflect awfulness back to you. When you feel this person wants to hurt me, they will hurt you. Do you know what I mean? It's as simplistic as that. So this is how you can understand already that you are, through your doing, acting, thinking, feeling, and saying, through this, you are creating this person's behavior. Okay, now I'm not saying this to sort of victim blame people at all. And some of this sort of this exists at these layers of kind of understanding that I don't think we're supposed to always get this stuff. But this is why I really say, like, just experiment with it, like really just sort of try and like check this stuff out for a little while. Like I do this all the time in my relationship, for example. I am actively changing my partner. And I'm changing my partner because I recognize that my partner, yes, she's an individual, but she's also a figment of my perception. I've created her. And sometimes I will, because of my fears, because of my ignorance, I will put my partner into a box. Not literally, but like a conceptual box where I say, oh, she doesn't like doing this. She doesn't, say, for example, I like going hiking in the mountains. We've gone hiking in the mountains once. It rained. She had a miserable time. I put her in a box and I say, she doesn't like hiking in the mountains. I feel great disappointment in me because my favorite thing in the world is to go hiking in the mountains. And then I start to resent her. I go, oh, why can't I have a partner who wants to hike in the mountains? Why do I have to have a partner who gets so upset in the rain? Oh, how can we be together? What's going on? You know what I mean? This is what happens. We start to then, with a little bit of evidence, we start to create a worst case scenario. So instead, what I can do in those moments is, instead of putting her in a box that I don't want her to be in, I instead begin to feel and think, I have a partner who loves the outdoors. I have a partner who loves the outdoors. And I begin to project this onto my partner. And lo and behold, the partner changes. Now, there are circumstances when the partner doesn't change. There are circumstances when the person doesn't change. And in a circumstance like that, you can kind of rest assured that there is some sort of frequency incompatibility going on. But pretty much by and large, I think you can guarantee that if you change your perception of a person, they will automatically change too. I remember there was this Dave Eggers short story. You might remember Dave Eggers, the American writer, and it was called On Calling Somebody a Good Person. And the story was all about how this man told his friend did something, his friend fixed a tire for someone. And then he said, wow, John, you're a good person. And John took this feeling of like, oh, I'm a good person, and started to do good works. He became a better partner to his wife. He became a better father. At work, he became more courteous and kind, etc., etc. So this is kind of just like a literal example of how we change people. But it's important that you can just realize, first off, that the beliefs and the thoughts that you have are creating the person. When you think, and you can just think about this right now with like maybe your mother, your father, maybe your partner, maybe even your children, do you know what I mean? You think like, what are the the rigid thoughts, beliefs, and feelings that I have about this person? Because this puts a person in a box and it ends up kind of creating it's you create your own monster in this way, by doing this. So by changing how you feel and think about a person, this is why it's sort of Neem Karoli Baba said, like the most important thing in the world to do is to love everyone. Like that's the purpose of life, is to try and love everyone. And this is the thing, because if you can love everybody, you will just experience love wherever you go. When you're going around carrying hate for some people, carrying frustrations, carrying sort of negative views of people, then that's the world you encounter. So it's really important not to do this because it's good to do it, but to do it just for your own benefit, to just try. Like I know that like most of you, and I've heard you guys in your sharings and so on, you have difficult relationships, people in your life who have caused you pain, and so on and so forth. Just experiment with this. Maybe it's even someone in your workplace. Just experiment with this idea of forming a new positive belief that suits you. So I used to do this all the time. For example, when I lived in Germany, and I created this huge fear around the Finanzamt. Finanzamt is the tax office, right? And it's, as you can imagine, as it's like the height of bureaucratical torture. You go in, you take a number, everyone is miserable in there. Like all the people who work behind the desks are wearing these sort of like wrist supports and elbow supports from repetitive strain injuries that they've got, and everyone is angry. And I would go into this place and I would just say, no, everybody here loves me and they want to help me. And I would carry that belief. I wouldn't let it shake. I would just say, no, everybody here loves me. They want to support me. They want me to be able to pay my contribution to German state taxes in the easiest, simplest way possible. And by believing that, by holding that belief, that was the reality that I experienced. Now, of course, I didn't always hold that belief, and it was very easy for me to fall back into a place of fear. But this is what I'm talking about. There's an amazing old teacher, this guy called Neville Goddard, and he would talk about this idea as well, which is very similar to this. And he called it the law of assumption. So, and how he would work with this law is sort of, he'd go to a restaurant and he would assume that the best table in the house is waiting for him. It's very interesting. All his recordings and stuff are all kind of New York in the 1920s, and it feels like he lived in this sort of Great Gatsby universe. But it was things like this, he's going to Carnegie Hall and there's no tickets for a performance. And he would go to the counter and just assume that there were tickets waiting for him. And the strength of his assumption cr- changed the reality, right? So, yeah, so there's kind of a lot of information there. I feel I've dropped a lot of information. Um, but the essence of it, the root of it, the simplicity of it is that you and reality are in a tug of war. So you're holding up one end of the rope and reality is holding up the other end. And if you don't like the reality that you're experiencing, just drop the bloody rope. I do this all the time where if I'm experiencing a sort of reality that I don't like, I just go, I'm ignoring this. I'm absolutely ignoring it. If I am ever experiencing a situation where I feel I'm being trapped or bullied or contracted, I just go, I'm ignoring this right in front of me right now. And instead, I'm bringing my focus to a different type of reality, a reality where I experience love and I get treated with love. Um, so that's it. I would love to know your thoughts on this. I'd love to know if you've experimented with this. And maybe you can start experimenting with this and tell me how it's going for you. Also, if there's any, you might notice some pushback in this too. Like I know, and this just shows us how wedded we are to some of our beliefs. You know, this can also be if you notice a lot of pushback in yourself. This could be exemplary of just sort of how solidified you might have become in just your reality. And what we're trying to learn with all of this is that reality is just a big lump of Play-Doh, and we get to shape it. We get to do what we want. We get to have the experiences that we want. I am just at a personal level, like I am so amazed at how I am able to transform uncomfortable relationships without the other person doing anything. Do you know what I mean? Like I can just come to this place of going, no, I will experience positivity, I will experience receptivity, and that's what happens. So, yeah, talk to you soon. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye bye.